An old man climbs to the roof of his house in Jerusalem, and he cannot sleep. His name is David. He has been a king for a long time now. But his hands, the hands resting on the stone parapet in the dark, these are not a king's hands. They are scarred. There is a white seam across one knuckle where a lion's tooth once went in. He was a boy then, alone in the hills above Bethlehem, watching his father Jesse's sheep when the lion came. He killed it. Later, he killed a bear the same way. He has killed men since. He has buried a son. And tonight, an old man on a roof, he is thinking about sheep. He picks up a reed pen, and in the language of his childhood, in words that will outlive every empire on earth, he writes 6 lines. Just 6. Not a sermon, not a law. A poem so short you could say the whole thing in the time it takes to cross a room. The Lord is my shepherd. Here's what most people miss. We have heard those words so many times that they have gone soft in our hands. We say them at gravesides. We print them on sympathy cards in gold cursive over a sunset. We have turned the most dangerous poem in the Bible into wallpaper. But David was not writing wallpaper. David was writing about a job he had actually done. A brutal, bloody, sleepless job. And then he was saying something almost unthinkable. He was looking up at the God who flung the stars across the sky, the God whose name the priests were afraid to even speak out loud. And he was calling that God his shepherd, as in, I am the sheep, as in, I am the dumb, defenseless, easily lost animal, and he is the one who keeps me alive. That is not a comforting thought. That is a terrifying one, because it means you are not in charge. It means everything you have, every breath, every meal, every morning you wake up, comes from a hand you cannot see. And then, halfway through these 6 lines, David writes something stranger still. He talks about 2 pieces of wood, a rod and a staff, 2 sticks, and he says, this dying king, this man who fought lions and armies, he says those 2 sticks are the most comforting things he can think of. Why? Why would 2 sticks comfort a king? Hold that thought, because we are going to walk through all 6 of these verses, 1 line at a time, and we are going to follow them down, because that is what this poem does. It does not sit still. It moves. It starts you in an open, green field in the sunlight, and then it walks you down, step by step, into the darkest place a human being can go. And then it brings you back up to a table with your name on it and a cup that will not stop overflowing. This is not a nursery rhyme. This is not a greeting card. This is not a funeral cliche. This is a map drawn by a man who had already walked the whole road, and he is handing it to you across 3,000 years, and he is saying, I know the way through. Follow me. Let's begin where he began. The Lord is my shepherd. I shall not want. Start with that word, shepherd. In Hebrew, it is built on the root roi, and it is not a title. It is an action happening right now and not stopping. The Lord shepherds me, present tense. He is doing it as you sit here. He was doing it before you knew his name. David knew exactly what that job involved because he had done it. A shepherd in those hills did not stroll through meadows with a flute. A shepherd slept in the open with one ear awake. A shepherd counted the flock at dusk and felt his stomach drop when the count came up short. A shepherd went out into the dark, alone, to find the one that was missing and fought whatever had it. That is the job David is handing to God. He is saying, I have been the one who stays awake so the flock can sleep. And now I know that someone has been doing that for me all along. Then 4 words that have undone more anxious hearts than any pill ever invented. I shall not want. He is not saying you will get everything you crave. He is saying you will lack nothing you actually need. There is a world of difference. One of David's translators put it plainly, because the Lord is my shepherd, I have everything I need. Read that slowly. Not everything I want, everything I need. And the only way you can say that and mean it is if you trust the one holding the staff. Verse 2, he makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside still waters. Now, pay attention to this, because it is the kind of detail you only know if you have actually kept sheep. A sheep will not lie down if it is afraid. It will not lie down if it is hungry, or if the flies are biting, or if there is tension in the flock. A frightened sheep stays on its feet, ready to bolt. So when the shepherd gets a sheep to lie down, to fold its legs under itself and rest in the open grass, it means that animal feels completely safe. It means every fear has been dealt with. The water is still, because sheep are terrified of moving water. They will not drink from a rushing stream. So the shepherd finds the quiet pool, or dams the current with his own hands, so the flock can drink without panic. That is what the verse is really saying. Not that life with God is one long nap in a field, but that he goes ahead of you and removes the things that keep you from rest. He makes the rest possible. You just have to lie down. Verse 3, he restores my soul. He leads me in paths of righteousness for his name's sake. There is a word shepherds use for a certain kind of sheep, a cast sheep. A cast sheep is one that has rolled onto its back in a hollow of ground and cannot get up. Its legs paddle uselessly in the air. And here is the terrible part. A cast sheep will die if no one comes. Its own weight crushes its lungs. Gases build in its belly, and within hours it is gone, killed by nothing but lying down wrong. The shepherd who loves his flock walks the field, looking for the ones flipped over and helpless. He kneels. He rolls the animal back onto its feet. He holds it steady until the blood moves again and the legs remember how to stand. He restores my soul. That is the picture. Not a gentle spa day for the spirit. A rescue. You, flipped over, dying of your own weight, unable to right yourself. And a shepherd who comes looking and lifts and holds you up until you can stand. And notice why he does it. For his name's sake, not because you earned it, not because you were worth the trouble, because of who he is. A good shepherd's reputation is written all over the condition of his flock. He restores you because rescuing the helpless is simply what he is like. So far, the road has been gentle, green grass, still water, a hand that lifts you when you fall. But David is a realist. He had walked these same paths of righteousness, and he knew exactly where some of them lead. They lead down into a canyon where the sun does not reach. Stay with me. Before we follow David down into that canyon, and we are going to because it is the heart of this whole poem, let me say one quick thing. If these 6 verses have ever meant something to you, if somebody read them at a funeral you sat through, or you found them yourself at 2 a.m. when you couldn't breathe for worry, then do me a favor, hit subscribe. That one tap tells the algorithm to put this in front of the next person lying awake who needs to hear that the valley has a way through it. And while you're there, leave a single word in the comments. Just tell me where you're from. I want to see how far this old shepherd's poem still travels. 3,000 years, and it is still walking. Let's keep it walking. Now, the canyon. Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. This is the center of the poem. And something happens here that you can feel even in English, but that hits like a hammer in Hebrew. Up to this point, David has been talking about God. He makes me lie down. He leads me. He restores. He. God is being described like a subject in a song. But the second David steps into the valley, the grammar breaks open. He stops talking about God and starts talking to God. You are with me. Your rod, your staff. The distance collapses. In the safe green field, God was a he. In the valley of death, God becomes a you. That is not an accident. That is the entire point. It is in the dark that he gets close. The phrase is the valley of the shadow of death. In Hebrew, it is one fused word, Tsalmavet. It is a strange word, almost never built this way. Two ideas crushed into one, shadow and death. Some scholars think it was the actual name of a real gorge, a deep, narrow ravine that shepherds had to lead their flocks through to reach summer pasture on the high ground. A place with sheer walls. A place where the sun only touched the floor for a few minutes at noon. A place where predators waited in the shadows on the ledges above. And a single misstep meant a fall with no bottom. There was no way around it. To get to the high country, the flock had to go through. And David knew that gorge in his own life. Don't picture him as a stained glass saint. Picture a young man hunted across the desert by King Saul for years, sleeping in caves, eating on the run, never sure if the next ridgeline hit a spear. Picture him decades later, an old king, fleeing his own capital city in the middle of the night because his own son Absalom had risen up to take the throne in David's life. The book of Samuel says he climbed the Mount of Olives weeping, with his head covered and his feet bare. A barefoot king crying, walking out of his own city. That is a man in the valley of the shadow. That is not a metaphor to him. That is a Tuesday. So when David says, I will fear no evil, he is not whistling in the dark. He is not pretending the valley isn't real. Look at the line again. He does not say there is no evil. He does not say there is no shadow, no death, no enemy on the ledge. The evil is real. The valley is real. He simply says he will not fear it. And there is only one reason given. Not because he is brave, not because the danger is small, for you are with me. Here's the part nobody tells you. The poem does not promise to take you around the valley. Read every line. There is no detour, no shortcut, no helicopter over the top. It promises something better and harder. It promises company. It promises that the one who made you will walk every step of the dark floor of that gorge beside you, close enough to touch, close enough that he stops being a he and becomes a you. And then David names what is in the shepherd's hands. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. There they are, the two sticks, the riddle from the very beginning of this poem. A dying king says these two pieces of wood are his comfort. And now, finally, we get to find out why. But you have to understand what these tools actually were. The rod was a short, heavy club. In Hebrew, shebet. The shepherd kept it on his belt, and it had two uses. The first was war. When a wolf came out of the rocks, or a lion, or a thief in the night, the rod was the weapon. The shepherd did not run. He stood between the flock and the thing that wanted to eat it, and he swung. David had done exactly that as a boy, with a real lion's jaw in his hands. But the rod had a second use, and this is the one almost nobody knows. The shepherd also used the rod to inspect the sheep. He would make each animal pass under it one at a time, and he would use the tip to part the thick wool down to the skin, searching for wounds, for parasites, for the hidden sore festering under all that fleece where no one could see it. The same word, shebet, is also the word for a king's scepter, the right to rule. The shepherd's club says two things at once. I will fight for you, and I see what you are hiding, even the wound under the wool, and I am not turning away. Then the staff. In Hebrew, mish'enah, a long pole with a hook curved at the end, and the staff was never a weapon. The staff was for the sheep alone. A shepherd used the gentle crook to draw a frightened lamb close without scaring it. He used it to guide an animal back onto the path with the lightest touch on its side. And when a sheep slipped over the edge of the gorge and hung there on a ledge, legs scrabbling over the drop, it was the hooked staff the shepherd reached down with to catch the animal under the chest and lift it, dead weight, back up to solid ground. Now put it together and you understand the dying king. The rod that fights off what would devour you. The rod that finds the wound you've hidden from everyone. The staff that pulls you back from the edge when you have already fallen. That is why two sticks comfort him, because they are the proof that the shepherd is armed for your enemies, honest about your wounds, and reaching for you the second you slip. Comfort, real comfort, is not the absence of the valley. It is the presence of the one who has the rod and the staff in his hands while you are in it. And then the whole poem turns. Watch what happens next. The sheep disappears. Suddenly, David is not an animal in a field anymore. He is a man at a table. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil. My cup overflows. In the ancient world, to sit at a man's table was to be under his protection. To eat his bread sealed a bond stronger than blood. And here is God, setting a feast, not after the enemies are gone, but right in front of them while they watch, unable to touch you. The oil poured on the head was the host's lavish welcome at a celebration, perfumed and dripping. And the cup does not just get filled, it overflows. It spills past the rim and runs down. The God of this poem does not measure out exactly enough. He pours until it runs over the table and onto the floor. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life. We read that word follow and we picture something trailing gently behind, like a shadow. The Hebrew is far more violent. The word is radaph. It means to chase, to pursue, to hunt down. It is the same word used for an army running down its enemies. David is saying that God's goodness and his chesed, his fierce, loyal covenant love, are not ambling along behind you. They are chasing you, hunting you, running you down all the days of your life. You have spent so long afraid of what might be pursuing you in the dark. And the whole time, what has been on your trail is mercy. This is where the poem reaches across 3,000 years and finds you exactly where you are. Think of the rooms where these 6 verses get whispered today. The hospital room at 3 a.m, when the monitor is the only light. The soldier in a foxhole with the words folded in his pocket. The prisoner. The widow standing at a graveside in the rain. Of all the passages in the Bible, this is the one human beings reach for at the edge of the valley. The one we say out loud when we have run out of every other word. Why this one? Why these 6 lines from an old man on a roof? Because there was one more shepherd. Centuries after David, a man stood on a hillside and said, I am the good shepherd, and the good shepherd lays down his life for the sheep. And then he did. He walked into the deepest Tsalmavet there has ever been, not as the shepherd with the rod, but as the lamb. He went down into the dark first, alone, so that when you walk through it, you would find it already has his footprints on the floor. The shepherd of Psalm 23 is the only shepherd who became a sheep to get you home. So we have walked the whole road with him, from the green field, down through the gorge, up to the overflowing table. 6 verses. Let me leave you with 3 things to carry out of this valley. First, the Lord is my shepherd is not a description of God. It is a claim about you. It means you are the sheep, not the strong one, not the one in control, but the one who gets lost and gets found and gets carried. The moment you stop pretending to be the shepherd of your own life is the moment this poem becomes true for you. Second, the valley is not a detour off the path. Look again. The same shepherd who leads you beside still waters is the one who leads you down into the shadow. The dark stretch is part of the road home, not a wrong turn off it. And you do not walk it alone. In the field, he was a he. In the valley, he becomes a you. And third, here is the line almost everyone misreads. The poem ends, I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. We hear that and think only of heaven, someday, far off. But the Hebrew underneath is closer to our returns and sit, like a guest coming back again and again to a table that is always set. It is not just a promise about where you go when you die. It is a promise about where you belong starting now. The sheep that wanders always gets chased down by mercy and brought back to the table. You will keep coming home. You cannot outwander the one who is hunting you with goodness. That is the secret of the most beloved poem ever written. It was composed by a man with a lion's scar on his hand and a son in the grave, who had walked every foot of that dark gorge, and who looked up at the end of his life and said, I shall not want. So let me ask you, which line in this poem found you tonight? The still waters, the valley, the table set in front of your enemies, the cup that would not stop overflowing? Tell me below. I read them. I want to know which line the shepherd used to reach you. The sun is low over Jerusalem. The old king sets down his pen. 6 lines. That's all it took. And 3,000 years later, the shepherd is still walking, still finding the lost ones, still reaching down with the staff. And he is reaching for you